Jessa Vaughn nearly dropped the tray of crystal flutes when the man in the midnight blue tux locked eyes with her from across the ballroom. It wasn't just that he was stupidly handsome, it was the way he looked at her. Like he saw something no one else in that room full of designer gowns and tailored suits even cared to notice. But she quickly turned away, pretending she hadn't felt that sudden thud in her chest. She was there to work, not to flirt. Especially not with the kind of man who had a watch that probably cost more than her rent for the year. The private dinner party was being hosted in a mansion high above the city, the kind of place you only saw in glossy magazines or movies. Jessa had been hired last minute after another server canceled. Rent was due, her car needed a new transmission, and she couldn't afford to be picky. She weaved through the crowd with precision, balancing champagne and canapés while dodging bored socialites and business moguls talking about mergers and ski resorts. "Excuse me," a deep voice said behind her. She turned and froze. It was him, midnight blue tux, sharp jawline. Eyes like a storm brewing over the ocean. "I didn't mean to startle you," he smiled, not like the other men in that room. His smile wasn't practiced, it was warm, curious. "I just wanted to say thank you. I noticed you've been making sure everyone's glass is full and you haven't stopped once." Jessa blinked. Thank you, that's kind of the job," he chuckled. "I've been to a lot of these parties, no one's ever done it with this much grace." She didn't know what to say to that. Compliments from men like him usually came with strings or expectations, but he didn't seem like he was trying to impress her. "Do you want a drink?" she asked, lifting the tray. "Champagne? I was hoping you'd have something stronger than that." She hesitated. "I think there's whiskey at the bar." He leaned in slightly. "Would you pick one for me?" She blinked again. "You want me to? Pick your drink. I trust your taste." Jessa didn't know why her fingers felt suddenly warm around the tray, but she nodded. "Okay. I'll be right back." When she returned a few minutes later with a glass of single malt, he was still there, waiting. "You came back," he said, taking the glass from her. "You asked me to." "Most people don't follow through." She tilted her head. "You must be around the wrong people." He grinned, then stuck out his hand. "Zayden Orland." She stared at his hand for a second before taking it. His palm was warm, his shake firm but not aggressive. "Jessa?" "Jessa," he repeated, like he was testing how it sounded in his mouth. "That fits." That was the first time someone at one of these events had used her name. She usually blended into the background, invisible in her black uniform and sensible shoes. "Are you one of the hosts?" she asked. Zayden chuckled. "No, I was dragged here by a friend. Thought I'd leave early, then I saw you." Her stomach flipped. "You don't even know me." "Not yet." A woman in diamonds brushed past them, giving Jessa a look like she'd just stepped in something unpleasant. Jessa straightened her shoulders. "I should get back to work." Zayden nodded. "Of course, but if you're still here when the party dies down, I'd like to talk more." Jessa didn't answer. She just walked away, heart pounding, the rest of the night blurred. Every time she passed Zayden, he was watching her. Not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to figure her out. She tried her best to ignore it, but her hands kept shaking just slightly. By the time the last guest left and the catering staff began clearing the last of the plates, Jessa was exhausted. She went into the kitchen, pulled off her apron, and ran a hand through her hair. "Leaving already?" She jumped and turned. Zayden stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, jacket off. "You're still here?" "I said I wanted to talk to you. We've already talked." "Not enough." She crossed her arms. "Look, I don't know what kind of guy you are, but if you're expecting something just because we exchanged a couple words, I'm not," he cut in, holding up his hands. "I'm not trying to hit on you, I just like talking to you, that's all." She studied him. "Why? Because you don't care who I am." She raised a brow. "Should I?" His lips curved. "Most people do." She tilted her head. "Okay, so who are you?" There was a beat before he answered. "I own Orland Tech." Her breath hitched. "Wait, that startup that got bought out last year for a couple $100 million, he shrugged, almost embarrassed. "Yeah, that one." Her jaw dropped slightly. "You're that Zayden?" "I was hoping you wouldn't connect the dots so fast." She let out a low whistle. "And here I thought you were just someone's hot brother." Zayden laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." Jessa looked away, trying to recalibrate. She wasn't used to this. Guys like Zayden didn't talk to girls like her, let alone follow them into kitchens and ask for whiskey recommendations. He stepped closer, careful not to invade her space. "Can I see you again?" she blinked. "Like, outside of this mansion?" "Yes," he said simply. "Dinner tomorrow." "Anywhere you want." "I don't date clients. I'm not hiring you. You're a millionaire." "That's not a reason." She stared at him. "Why me?" He smiled, slower this time. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since you handed me that drink." She swallowed. "I don't do casual," she said. "Good, neither do I." Jessa knew she should say no. Her life was messy. She worked 2 jobs, had no time for romance, and definitely didn't belong in Zayden Orland's world, but something in his eyes made her say, "Fine, 1 dinner." His smile lit up the room. "Pick you up at 7? Where?" "I'll send a car. I don't take rides from strangers." "Then I'll meet you at the restaurant. You pick." She nodded slowly. "Okay." Zayden leaned closer, his voice low. "Jessa?" "Yeah, I'm glad I came to this party." She tried to act unaffected, but her cheeks burned. When she left that night, the air felt different, lighter, like something had shifted. She had no idea that one night of waitressing would change everything. And she definitely didn't know that the man in the midnight blue, Tux the millionaire with the stormy eyes, would fall in love with her. The restaurant he chose was the kind of place that didn't display prices on the menu and had a maitre d' who greeted her by name the moment she walked in. Jessa had almost turned around twice on the way there. It wasn't that she was nervous. Well, maybe she was, but it was more the fact that she didn't belong in a place with velvet chairs and gold chandeliers. She'd worn the best dress in her closet, a navy shift she'd only ever used for job interviews. She'd paired it with the heels she kept in her car for emergencies, ones that pinched slightly and made her walk a little too carefully. Zayden stood as soon as he saw her, his eyes sweeping over her in a way that made her feel like she wasn't just dressed appropriately, she was exactly what he'd hoped to see. "You're early," she said, sliding into the chair he pulled out for her. "I didn't want to miss a second," he replied, sitting across from her. She gave him a look. "That line usually work." "I've never used it before," he said, picking up the wine list. "Red or white? I work nights. Coffee is my love language." He laughed, and something in his expression softened. The waiter appeared, and Zayden ordered without looking at the menu. She didn't recognize a single item he requested, but she acted like she did. When they were alone again, he leaned forward, elbows resting on the linen-covered table. "You always this composed?" "I don't have time to fall apart." "That's not what I meant." "Maybe not, but it's what I heard." He studied her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but as if he was genuinely trying to understand how she moved through the world. "What do you want to do, Jessa?" She blinked. "I'm doing it." "No, I mean, what do you want to be doing?" She hesitated. No one had asked her that in years. Not since before her mom got sick, before bills and responsibilities took the place of dreams. She reached for the glass of water. "I wanted to open a bakery." His brow lifted. "You bake." "Used to, when I had time. I had a name picked out and everything." "Tell me." She hesitated. "I won't laugh." "Crumbs and whisk," she said finally. "I was going to foster cats out of the back room. People could adopt while they ate cookies." Zayden smiled slowly. "That's brilliant." She shrugged, hiding the warmth his words sparked. "Didn't exactly scream financial security. Neither did inventing a scheduling app that crashed for the first 3 months." She looked up. "That was you," he nodded. "We fixed it, eventually." Jessa leaned back in her chair. "So you didn't just wake up rich, not even close." He paused. "My dad drove a delivery truck. My mom worked the night shift at a hospital. I built websites after school to help pay for my sister's braces." She tilted her head. "You have a sister, 2 years younger. She teaches chemistry at a high school in Seattle." "Do your parents still work?" "They retired last year. I paid off the house, sent them on a cruise. They're trying to convince me to adopt a golden retriever." She smiled despite herself. "That's weirdly wholesome." "I like weirdly wholesome things." Their food arrived, delicate plates layered with ingredients Jessa couldn't pronounce. She picked at hers carefully, trying not to seem overwhelmed. "Do you cook?" he asked, watching her. "I make a mean grilled cheese. That count?" Only if you use real butter, always, he grinned. You're full of surprises. She raised an eyebrow. You expected something else. I didn't know what to expect. That's the best part. The conversation drifted after that, slowly unfolding like a book with pages she hadn't realized she'd wanted to read. He didn't talk about money or connections. He asked about her favorite childhood memory, the last movie that made her cry, and whether she'd ever broken a bone. She told him about the time she fell off a swing in 3rd grade and walked around with a sprained wrist for 2 days because she didn't want to miss recess. He laughed so hard he drew glances from other tables. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate custard that looked too fancy to eat, Jessa realized she hadn't checked the time once. He paid without a word, not even glancing at the check. When they stepped outside, a sleek black car was waiting at the curb. He opened the door for her, but she shook her head. I'll grab the train. Let me take you home. I don't let men I've just met know where I live, he nodded. Fair. They stood in silence for a moment, the city lights casting a golden glow on the sidewalk. This was, she started, better than you expected, he finished. She smiled. Yeah, it was. Can I see you again? She hesitated. I don't know what this is. It doesn't have to be anything yet, just dinner, conversation, no pressure. She looked at him, really looked. Okay. He stepped back, as if afraid getting too close would ruin the fragile thing they'd just started building. Good night, Jessa. Good night, Zayden. She turned and walked toward the subway, the clack of her heels echoing off the concrete. She didn't look back, but she didn't stop smiling either. Halfway down the steps, she paused and pulled out her phone. She didn't text him. She didn't even have his number. Still, she found herself searching for crumbs and whisk in her notes app. The old logo sketch she'd drawn years ago was still there, faint, pixelated, but waiting, just like part of her had been. Jessa stood in the center of the gleaming kitchen at Maison Leclerc, holding a piping bag filled with lemon cream and wondering when her life had become this surreal. A week ago, she was trying to cobble together enough tips to cover her electricity bill. Now she was standing in the test kitchen of one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, shadowing the pastry chef courtesy of Zayden, not because he bought her way in. No, he'd made that clear. Just a door, he'd said. You decide if you walk through it. The executive chef had called her the next day, saying her name had come recommended by someone with an unusual amount of enthusiasm and that she could shadow for a week if she was serious. Jessa was nothing if not serious. She piped a perfect rosette onto a tart, then stepped back just as Chef Morau passed behind her. He paused, glanced at her work, nodded once, then moved on, progress. She left the kitchen just before midnight, legs aching, hands dusted in flour, and a strange sense of anticipation buzzing beneath her skin. The street outside was quiet, the kind of stillness that made city nights feel cinematic. She walked a few blocks before she saw the black SUV idling near the corner, the window rolled down. You look like you just won a baking competition, Zayden said, eyes lit with something between amusement and pride. Jessa opened the door and got in. I didn't burn anything. That's a win, he glanced at her hands. You've got sugar on your ear, she reached up laughing. Great, I'm a walking dessert. You say that like it's a bad thing. She looked at him, really looked, and something tightened low in her ribs. There was no tuxedo tonight, no tailored suit. Just a soft gray sweater that stretched across his broad frame and jeans that looked like he actually lived in them. He didn't ask where she wanted to go. He just drove. They ended up in an empty parking lot above a scenic overlook, the city glittering below like a spilled treasure chest. He opened the back of the SUV and pulled out a blanket, tossing it over the hood before hopping up and offering her a hand. She hesitated. No strings, he said. I'm not worried about strings. I'm worried about dying of embarrassment if I slip and faceplant. Well, then I'll catch you, he said simply. She climbed up. They sat side by side, neither speaking for a moment. The wind tugged at her hair and the lights below blinked in slow rhythm. You ever think about how fast things change? He asked eventually. All the time. My entire company started because I got stuck waiting outside a dentist's office for 3 hours. All I had was a notebook and a dying phone battery. And here I thought all tech empires began in garages. He grinned, but there was something quieter in his expression tonight, less polish, more edge. What happened? She asked. He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. A board member tried to force a merger I didn't want. I voted him out, lost half my investors in a week. Jessa blinked. What you do? Sold part of the company to buy them out, rebuilt it with people I trusted. That's ruthless. It was necessary. She studied him. You're not what I expected. No, I figured you were one of those guys who never heard the word no. I've heard it more times than I can count, but I never let it stop me. She pulled her knees up to her chest. I wish I had that kind of nerve. You do. You just haven't been given the space to use it. She looked away, but not before he saw the flicker of something in her eyes. What are you afraid of, Jessa? She gave a short laugh. Where do I start? Start anywhere. She took a breath. I'm afraid I'll let myself want something too big. And then watch it fall apart. He didn't speak for a moment. I think the trick is realizing it might fall apart, he said finally, but deciding it's worth it anyway. She turned her head. You're really bad at being just a casual date. Good thing I never said I wanted to be casual. He leaned in, just enough that she felt the heat of his breath. She didn't move. I didn't expect you, he said softly. I didn't even know I was looking for anything. Then you handed me a glass of whiskey and looked at me like I wasn't wearing a price tag. I didn't know who you were, exactly. The silence between them stretched, golden and fragile. Then she said, I'm not a project, I know, and I don't need saving, I know that too. She looked back at the city. Then what do you want from me? His voice was quiet. Time and maybe a chance. Something inside her cracked a little. When he dropped her off at her apartment, he didn't try to kiss her. He didn't even leave the car. She turned before going inside, and he was still watching her through the window, like he wasn't ready to let the night end. She went to sleep with her heart beating too fast and her mind racing. The next morning, she walked into the test kitchen and found a white box sitting at her station. Inside were 6 perfect pastries, each labeled with a note in looping handwriting. Lemon, your favorite. Chocolate, because you earned it. Almond, because you're stronger than you think. There was no name, but she didn't need one, she already knew. Jessa stood just inside the open glass doors, heart pounding as the wind swept through the rooftop garden, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and something richer, something like possibility. Golden lights were strung overhead, soft and glowing, casting warm halos across the polished wood deck. A string quartet played low in the corner, their music barely audible over the buzz of conversation. Dozens of people mingled in elegant clusters, dressed in formal wear that probably required its own insurance policy. She tugged at the strap of her deep burgundy dress, not because it didn't fit, it did, perfectly, but because it was the first time she'd worn something that hadn't come from a clearance rack. Zayden had left it on her door 2 days ago, tucked in a black garment bag with nothing but a handwritten card, "You belong here. If you'll let yourself," she hadn't responded. She hadn't needed to. He spotted her instantly, breaking away from a small circle of executives near the fireplace and crossing the space like there was no one else in the world. You came, you invited me. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't either. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. You look like you could bring a man to his knees. She gave him a dry glance. Try not to collapse. It's your party. It's not. It's a fundraiser for a youth entrepreneurship program. You're the largest donor, still not my party. She arched a brow. Modest now, selective. He offered her his arm, and after a pause, she took it. As they walked through the crowd, people glanced their way, some politely curious, others less subtle. Jessa held her head higher, refusing to shrink. She had spent her life mastering quiet corners and back doors. Tonight, she was stepping into the center. They stopped near the bar. Zayden waved off the bartender and handed her a glass of something sparkling. She tilted it toward him. So, what's the catch? No catch. You brought me here. You dressed me. You put me next to you in front of people who probably own art they've never seen. I wanted you beside me. Why now? He hesitated, then said, because last night I almost called you 3 times, and each time I stopped myself because I was afraid I'd push you away. Then I realized if I didn't try harder, I'd lose you anyway. She stared at him. You don't get to lose something you never had. He set down his glass. Then let me earn it. Before she could reply, a woman in a sapphire gown appeared at Zayden's side, her smile sharp and practiced. I thought you'd vanished, she said, eyes flicking to Jessa. I see you've brought someone. Zayden's posture didn't change. Jessa Vaughn, this is Victoria Langley. She's on the board. Jessa held out her hand. Nice to meet you. Victoria barely touched her fingers. And what do you do, Jessa? I'm in pastry arts. Ah, a pause. How refreshing. Jessa smiled tightly. And you? Legacy wealth. I do philanthropy now. Jessa turned to Zayden. I'm going to find the garden. I need a minute. I'll come with you. No, she said too quickly. I need to breathe. Alone. She walked away without waiting for a response, weaving through the crowd until she found the path lined with lanterns leading to the far end of the rooftop. A low wall overlooked the city, and she leaned against it, closing her eyes. She didn't belong here. Not because of the clothes or the money or the questions, but because every second she stood beside Zayden, she felt more like a risk than a reward. I didn't know she'd be here. She turned. Zayden stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. I didn't ask, she said. I should have warned you. She's not subtle. I don't care about her. Then what do you care about? She hesitated. I care that I'm not a showpiece. I care that I don't know where I stand. I care that I feel like I'm being pulled into a world that might spit me out the second I stop being interesting. He stepped closer. You're not interesting to me. You're extraordinary. Please don't say things like that unless you mean them. I do mean them. She turned her face away. Then why is this so hard? Because I've never been in love with someone I couldn't control. Her breath caught. He took another step, close now, but not touching her. I don't want to change you. I don't want to fix you. I just want to know you. And I want you to know me, not the bank account or the boardrooms or the press releases. Just me. She looked up at him, eyes guarded. What if I don't know how to be with someone like you? Then we learn together. The wind picked up, tugging at the edge of her wrap. He reached out, gently settling it back over her shoulder. She didn't flinch. There's something you should see, he said. She followed him back through the party, down the elevator to the private garage. A sleek car waited, doors already open. He didn't speak as he drove, didn't fill the silence with empty words. She appreciated that when they pulled up outside a narrow storefront in Brooklyn, she blinked. The windows were dark, but the for lease sign was gone. Zayden unlocked the door and pushed it open. She stepped inside. The smell of fresh paint and sawdust filled the air. The walls were soft cream, the floors warm oak. At the back, a counter stood unfinished, and behind it, stainless steel equipment gleamed under temporary lighting. A sign leaned against the wall, still wrapped in protective plastic. Crumbs and whisk. She couldn't breathe. I spoke to the landlord, he said quietly. He was retiring. I told him about your idea. He liked it, said this place needed more heart. Her voice was a whisper. You bought it. I leased it. In your name. The business is yours. No strings. She turned to him, tears in her eyes. Why would you do this? Because I believe in you, and because I love you. She froze. I love you, Jessa, not the idea of you, not the version I imagined. You, the real you, the woman who walked into a mansion and didn't flinch. The one who keeps showing up even when the world tells her not to. She stepped closer. I don't know how to do this. We'll figure it out. Slowly, she reached up and touched his face. You really love me, with everything I have. She kissed him then, softly at first, then fiercely, like she was finally letting go of every doubt she'd carried. When she pulled back, she was crying and laughing all at once. Okay, she said. Let's build something. Together, they stood in the middle of the empty shop, surrounded by the first bricks of a future neither of them had seen coming. And for the first time, Jessa didn't feel like she was pretending. She felt like she was home. Jessa stood before the window of crumbs and whisk, clutching a folded sheet of parchment paper. The final permits had come through that morning. The health inspection passed. The last mixer had been installed just after sunrise. All that was left was to open the doors. Outside, the sun climbed steadily above the rooftops, casting long golden stripes across the sidewalk. Zayden stood beside her, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a slight crease between his brows as he studied the same blank window she did. He'd been quiet all morning, not withdrawn, thoughtful. Like something was on the edge of his mind. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about risk." She turned. "What kind of risk? The kind you don't write into contracts, the kind that makes you put your heart somewhere unguarded." Jessa traced the edge of the paper in her hand. "You saying this bakery's a gamble?" He shook his head. "I'm saying you and I are." She looked at him fully then. "Do you doubt us?" "No," he said, "but I know what it took to get here, and I don't want to pretend it didn't cost you anything." She folded the parchment slowly. "It cost me the version of myself that never believed in more. I'm glad she's gone." "You are more," he said. "You always were." They didn't speak again until the first customer walked in, an older woman with silver hair and a floral scarf who asked for 2 lemon tarts and a recommendation. Jessa handed over a card with the day's special and smiled without thinking. It wasn't a performance. It was the beginning of something that finally felt like hers. By mid-afternoon, the bakery buzzed with quiet foot traffic. A young couple lingered at the window seats, and a teenager snapped a photo of the custom cat mural painted along the back wall. Everything Jessa had imagined had come to life, only warmer, messier, more real. Zayden had retreated to the small office upstairs where he'd been fielding calls all morning. She found him standing at the desk, his jacket slung over the back of the chair, a pen tucked behind his ear. "You look like a man about to rewrite something important," she said. "I am," he replied. "My board wants me to take the company public." Her breath caught. "That's huge." "It is, but it changes everything, means scrutiny, pressure, less time." She leaned against the doorframe. "You're not the kind of man who backs down from pressure." He looked at her with something unreadable. "I was going to say no. But then I thought about the way you run this place, about how you don't compromise who you are even when the world expects you to." She stepped closer. "What are you saying, Zayden?" "I'm saying I want to do this on my terms. Keep the company growing, but not at the cost of the life I want to build." "And what life is that?" He crossed the room and took her hand. "One where I wake up next to you, one where we argue about whether to add raspberry scones to the menu. One where I'm not watching you from across a ballroom, I'm standing beside you every day." Her throat tightened. "That sounds dangerously like a proposal." He pulled a small velvet box from the inside pocket of his jacket. "It is." She stared at him. "You're serious?" "I've never been more sure of anything." "Zayden, this is fast, not fast," he said. "Right, everything before you was just noise. You are the moment that finally made sense." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple but stunning. A single diamond set in a band that shimmered faintly in the soft office light. "I don't want a perfect partnership, I want a real one, with you." She didn't cry, she didn't collapse, she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice clear. "I want that too." He slid the ring onto her finger, and just like that, the world shifted. It wasn't louder or brighter, it was steadier. Like her feet had finally found the ground beneath them. They didn't announce it to the world that day. They didn't need to. Their love had never been about spectacle. It had always been about the quiet, certain moments. Like this one. A few weeks later, they stood hand in hand inside City Hall, wearing clothes that didn't draw attention and smiles that did. The ceremony was short, the vows personal. No media, no press. Just them and her best friend as witness, promising each other a life built not out of expectations, but out of truth. Afterward, they returned to the bakery, where the scent of vanilla and cinnamon greeted them like an old friend. Jessa kicked off her heels and walked barefoot across the kitchen tiles, laughing as Zayden spun her once, flour brushing across her cheek like a kiss. Later, they sat on the floor, eating still warm cookies from a tray neither of them remembered baking, her head resting on his shoulder. "I never imagined this," she whispered. "I did," he said. "From the moment you handed me that glass of whiskey," she laughed, pressing her palm to his heart. "You're ridiculous. I'm in love." For the first time, she didn't doubt it. She didn't brace for the fall. She just leaned into it. Because love, she'd learned, wasn't about grand entrances or perfect timing. It was about someone seeing all of you, even the raw, unfinished parts, and choosing you anyway, and Zayden had chosen her. Every day after, they built something real. A life filled with imperfect moments, late-night baking sessions, burnt batches, and unexpected laughter. The bakery flourished, so did they. And on quiet mornings, When the world was still waking, they would sit by the window with 2 mugs of coffee and no words at all, just the kind of peace that only comes from knowing you are exactly where you're meant to be together. Always.